Coming up on We Want to Believe.
He was actually the victim of a homicide, an unsolved homicide.
As soon as you turn the spirit box on, we got like, help me.
Some people go missing by accident. Sometimes there's foul play.
See that? In the latter half of 2020, the We Want to Believe team embarked on a series of Bigfoot hunts in the interior of British Columbia, Canada. Our quest for some evidence of the monster, however small, took us to 3 different locations. The first was an area not too far from our base of operations in Kamloops, British Columbia. Our guide, Indigenous artist and storyteller Chris Bowes, relayed some frightening encounters he had had with the Sasquatch.
There's a reason why we can't find it and can't track it. It doesn't want to be seen.
Co-investigator Sarah Jane and I came across some wood structures that may have been signs of the creature's presence. Our second hunt took us to a remote lake with a guide, Mike, who's reported hearing wood knocks in the area for the better part of 20 years. Wood knocks are believed to be Bigfoot's means of communicating with each other, or a way of warning others not to trespass on their territory.
Woo!
While myself, Marcus, and Mike ventured out onto the lake, co-producer and sound man Sean heard 3 knocks from the woods nearby.
Well, while you were in the water, I heard some banging over there.
The final adventure took us up a logging road in dense woods east of town. And although we didn't encounter anything we can attribute to a Sasquatch, lead investigator Peter Renn led the team on an impromptu spirit box session.
Is there anyone here that wants to greet us to say hello?
Who's that?
Help me.
Help me?
What is your name?
We immediately captured a cry for help and, eventually, coaxed out a possible name for whoever, or whatever, we were communicating with in the woods. And that name was Robert. The name haunted us for months. Who was Robert, and what happened to him? Given we live in a rural area, it's not uncommon for hikers and backcountry adventurers to go missing, and, in some cases, never be found. Also, if someone meets with foul play, the body typically ends up in a river or buried amongst the trees. Our curiosity eventually got the better of us, and after discussing next steps with the team, it was decided that We Want to Believe would venture into the woods again. I'd like to thank you for watching We Want to Believe and ask that if you enjoy our show, please subscribe to our channel right now, like this video, and click on the bell so you can be notified each time a new video goes up. Now back to the show.
So I did some research and found out that there were several people who had gone missing in the region recently, not necessarily where we were, but in the region. And one of them was named Robert. He was actually the victim of a homicide, an unsolved homicide. So that could correlate to someone saying help me and the spirit potentially being trapped in the woods. So we decided we were going to go back up. It was myself, Peter, and of course Sarah, our other investigator, and a new cameraman, Michael D. Stewart, who joined us for this adventure. So we went out, we found a location that was very close to where we had been in the fall. And we set up, and the first thing we did is we went out and tried some call blasting. Before going out, I talked with Mike Ritzy, who's been with search and rescue in the area for a very long time. Lots of experience.
You've been with search and rescue for a while now. How often do you kind of get called out for missing persons in like the Mount Lolo Pinatan area?
There's been a few. We do between 40 and 50 calls a year. So, I mean, every couple of years we have a call up in that area.
What's sort of a common reason, not just for that neck of the woods, but that people kind of find themselves in distress? when they venture out like that?
You know, a lot of people that find themselves in a problem, they're not really bush savvy, and they're not equipped. They don't leave a trip plan with people. They don't tell people where they're going, so that delays the search for them. You know, they don't know how to use a compass or a GPS, or sometimes they go with their phone, locate you by your phone, but sometimes the battery's dead or whatever. We just did one up north of Quesnel, and they were able to find the phone, but unfortunately the person was not with the phone, and that person's still missing. You know, there's many different reasons why people go missing. Some people go missing by accident, and some people don't want to be found, and sometimes there's foul play.
This time around, we went to an undisclosed location in Kamloops. Pretty sure I can't tell you. It was myself, Jason, and Peter, and Mike, our cameraman. We went up the mountain a bunch. It was very windy. I got a little car sick, but I didn't want to tell anyone, so shh. We found a clearing that we could kind of set up our gear to see if maybe we could capture something like, I don't know, an EVP, something on the spirit box, fucking see Sasquatch. I don't know. I want to see if we can capture something.
Apache war song.
Hey yo, hey ya, hey ya, hey yo, oh ya, hey ya, hey ya, and yo, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, and yo, hey yo, hey na, oh ya, and yo, hey na, oh ya, and yo, hey ya, and yo, oh ya, hey ya, oh ya, and yo, hey na, oh ya, and yo.
Interesting.
Do you want to do another one?
I think that might be good.
Imagine if there's like all of a sudden out of nowhere, there's like fucking 400 Native Americans just standing around us.
We would
work too well.
Yeah.
Oh shit, the wrong chant, it means war.
There were tribes that feared Sasquatch coming in, stealing their women and children at night. But for the most part, a lot of what we've read and researched, that they lived in harmony. So we wanted to kind of try to kind of feel like we're in that same environment, in that same time. So we brought the speaker out, we brought the laptop out, and we all went in different areas, and we just blasted it. We didn't necessarily know exactly what was being said by the Native Americans in the actual recording, but we figured, it's, a lot of what the Native Americans, they spoke of peace and being one with nature and one with the surroundings and the spirit world. So we figured, whatever is actually being said, we have to believe, it's of peace, it's of being, together and unity.
You want to start?
Sure.
Should I just be pressing these to go through the...
No, just leave it as is.
Leave it going? Okay.
Okay, do we have a Robert here at all? Robert, can you step forward? Robert, can you say hello? Is there anybody else that would like to say hello to us? Please do so. Is there a marshal here at all? Yeah. Did you hear that? I'm not saying it's paranormal, but that was charged.
Was charged?
Yeah. Robert, are you around us? Whoop, whoop. We're Pac-Man. Do we have anyone
here that wants to say hello? I don't know if that's my mind playing tricks on me, but it sounds like a distant hello. I don't know.
Yeah, it sounded.
I
heard that too.
Oh, fuck.
Start. All right, so Richard, could you kind of introduce yourself?
My name is Dr. Richard Tortorella. I have a PhD in computing science. My background is in computing science, specialty in artificial intelligence, but I also have a background in physics and chemistry.
Right off the gate, we fired up the spirit box and we got help me, you know, in the middle of nowhere. Did a line of questioning. We got a name, Robert. And we got a continuous mumbling throughout the entire session that we did, which we found really odd. Like it was constant. So hearing that, what goes through your mind? Like we're out in the middle of the woods and we're picking this up.
Sure. I guess my first question is, or at least my trained mindset would go to, what is your spirit box? Or in general, what's an EVP? I mean, I think we have to understand that in order to understand the validity of any type of device we use, either a spirit box or voice recorder, tape recorder, whatever we're using. The concept of EVPs, and in fact, I was looking at knowing that I'd be coming tonight, my list of old books, and one of them, I'm not sure if you can see that, it's from the 50s, or this particular is from 69 or 1970, but it goes back to the 50s, Voices from the Tapes. It's an old concept that somehow tape recording devices, in this case was reel-to-reel, but as technology progressed, so did the medium in which we recorded, was somehow able to record disembodied voices. And in the grand scheme of things, that is uniquely weird. There's really nothing that we can explain as why we should be recording voices that aren't there. So I guess the first thing for me is, as a scientist, is to look at how does any voice recording system work? And it's a diaphragm, or we call it a microphone, but it's basically, it's a coil of wire around a magnetic field. And as it moves in and out of this magnetic field, usually produced by sound, the compression wave, the energy wave of air hitting it, which is basically what a sound wave is, hits it, moves this diaphragm in and out, and that creates an electrical current. A very, very small current is then processed by whatever device is doing the recording. It's amplified and then thrown onto a recording medium. Same way an electric guitar works. You hit the electric guitar, you hear nothing. You plug it into an amplifier, Marty McFly style, Back to the Future, you get blown out of the barn. How is a spirit entity? Assuming they exist. I mean, we have to have some basic assumptions before we go forward. Assuming there is such a thing as a ghost. It is likely to be non-corporeal, so it has to be energy-based. And since we know the electromagnetic spectrum, other than basically the technology we're using right now to light my house, or to even use this wireless signal from this laptop device that I'm communicating with you, is on the electromagnetic spectrum. And any ghost would also inhabit that same spectrum at some point. I mean, visible light is one type, radio waves is another, but it's all part of the same thing. Gamma rays, you name it. So in terms of an EVP, if a ghost is somehow able to manipulate that, because it itself will be part of that spectrum, my thought is it's actually interacting with the pickups at the microphone level, and it's just being recorded and amplified by the device. Having said all that, what would cause it in the middle of the deep woods? Obviously, there are 1,001 different sources of electromagnetic radiation. We've seen the Northern Lights here in Vancouver. So it could be anything from that to someone's cell phone would and has caused, and you probably hear it yourself, especially the older ones, will cause a tick in speakers. It's part of the problem with technology that you have what they call interference, electromagnetic interference. But the bigger problem to that is something called pareidolia. As a scientist, we have it all the time in data sets, in the sense of, I want to see this particular data set do this, and therefore I'm going to mentally only pay attention to stuff that does that and ignore everything else around it. Research bias, or in this case pareidolia, where we try to make reason of nonsense. I can never pronounce the name, but the ink tests, Rorschach, I can never pronounce the name.
Rorschach, yeah.
Yeah, same thing. It works on exactly the same principle. It's what does your brain is attempting to make sense of garbage, of chaos. And from that, we get an idea. Now, the issue, of course, when you're having a spirit box is you will have it fire one good answer that sounds, Robert, which could very well be. However, the problem is the next 20 questions don't come back anything that makes sense, and therefore you naturally discard it. So you're waiting for that one to make sense, but because it's 1 in 20, 1 in 30, 1 in 50, the likelihood of it being an active response decreases. So you can say, well, I'm only going to get a 5% positive hit, which is 1 in 20. But then the problem with that is that why only 5%? If there truly is an entity speaking to you, you would think they'd be screaming bloody murder, trying to get your attention because they've been stuck in this existence for however long they have been. You would think they'd be a much more aggressive, not just a single word. So why would Robert want to be reaching out to you? That's a good question. Perhaps he really did pick up on some poor soul that is lost there, is looking for some sort of closure. Given the fact that technically you could argue we are all souls in a meat packet, we're all ghosts. We're just inhabiting this particular body, or each individual's body, I'd hope, at any point in time. So given that we are a ghost, in effect, it could be that we're interacting with them at another level that simply isn't physical. It's whatever our ghost level is interacting with their level, their existence, whatever their particular energies, whatever you wish to describe it. I mean, none of it really, you've gone well beyond the realms of physics at this point, and now you're getting into the philosophy of exactly what life is. But assuming that they were once human, you would think that the problems that we are experiencing as humans, loneliness, companionship, and everything else would still be present within that environment. And thus, it would make logical sense to me they'd be reaching out for some sort of contact and maybe some sort of assistance somehow.
Do you think the spirit box could have picked up, say, on another radio, like a person on a walkie-talkie, or even picked up, say, because certain rocks can hold certain electromagnetic frequencies. Maybe we tapped into something like that, like in the region. Is that possible, or is that sort of...
I think given the energies required in the sense of those spirit boxes, they are operating off standard AM, FM bands, given the energy required and the sensitivity of your receiver. Now, the chip on most of the spirit boxes is a digital system, so it doesn't use a manual, so it's not a cone like the old style knobs that actually affected a piece of conductivity or a conductive cathode over an antenna. This is actually just a digital transistor that is actually changing the frequency. So the sensitivity of that to be able to detect and hold it would imply that there's a pretty decent amount of oomph behind it from a power standpoint. I would say that you would probably need somebody with a decent transmitter at maybe 10, 15 feet, like the old toys we used to use as kids, the Spy AM, FM gadgets we used to build from kids, at least I did back in the 70s. They were fantastic to build, and you used to solder them with a 9-volt battery and stick it in your mom's kitchen. You could listen to conversations and think you were a spy because it was transmitting to 800 AM, I think it was the station back in the day. But that's the problem, is that you need a decent amount of power with a short range. So anything that it's picking up is either going to be very short range, so likely one of the members of your team. Either they had a cell phone or something, but even that is unlikely because they operate completely different frequency range. We're talking thousands of times the different frequency, megahertz to gigahertz for phones. But it would likely have to be environmental.
In the beginning, I was a little skeptical about spirit boxes. Because you are picking up the radio stations, and so sometimes what you're hearing is DJs, little bits of DJs. But, over the years, and especially with investigations with Peter, I have really heard things that are absolutely not radio DJs and are not, just weird frequency blips or anything like that are something a little different that I couldn't explain. So I'm always really interested to listen when the spirit box comes out. It's not always going to give you some response, but sometimes it can really surprise you.
With the spirit box, you're tuning into AM, FM frequencies, but could you also be tuning into like other people's, CBs or shortwave or anything like that, and people be messing with us? But what Robert sort of brought up what's kind of interesting is that's not necessarily the case, because the transmission receiving device in these spirit boxes is so small that whoever you are picking up would have to be within meters of you.
All right, so we're going to do a bust a move. Just further deep into the woods. That's what I was talking about.
Bust a move.
Bust a move.
Dance. Well, the truck's that way, so...
Do you want to go that way or should we go deeper?
I've just lost my bearings actually. The truck is that way, isn't it? Yes, we walked up there. Okay.
Great, we're gonna get lost. I think it was back that way.
I thought it was that way.
Yeah.
Shit. I'm pretty good with stuff like that.
The area, I guess, particular, say Lolo or Pinatan, what dangers kind of are there up there, like in terms of wildlife or terrain? Like what kind of risk is there if you do kind of lose your way?
I think the big thing is being injured out there, not by wildlife, but, there's some steep areas. If you fell and broke a leg or a hip or something, I could see that creating quite a problem. The big carnivores up there, there's cougars and bears, but I know of no attacks up there that people have had because of these animals. But I think being injured from a fall or something like that, slip off a windfall, you could break a leg pretty easy in that country, and that would be the end of you fairly quickly.
With authority.
Doesn't want us to go to 4 and up.
Really?
No.
That's weird.
Denied.
Well, you normally on these you can go to 6. I haven't usually seen them go up to 16. 4, 5, 6, 7, 1.
We returned to sort of a location and decided to do the two-way radio experiment. Peter sort of set up with one radio in one part of the woods. Sarah went in another part of the woods, and we kind of put the spirit box in the middle. And they sort of, basically like you'd do with an EVP session, you would sort of talk through the two-way radios, asking questions, and the hope was we'd pick something up on the spirit box.
So I've been testing the RF theory for a number of years, just by that personal experience I had a few years ago. Basically, we were in an investigation in Richmond, BC, and we were setting up, and one of my co-investigators was in a vacant room, and I could see him through this glass, and we both had our walkie-talkies on, and he walked in there and basically said, because there was a lot of reports of a child being walking around the site and stuff like that. So he walked in there and he introduced himself, and he said that we're going to be asking you a few questions. And he turned around to walk out, and just as he walked out through the walkie-talkies that we had at the time, we had a child's voice saying hello. Ever since then, I have started data logs at the beginning with things like the original Frank box and that kind of thing. And I know a lot of people are skeptical about spirit box, and it creates a lot of headaches for people. But I think over the years I've had probably more credible evidence come through on spirit boxes in relation to the places I'm in, or in relation to most of the EVPs I've had. Everyone around here would like to make their presence known.
Can you see us right now?
See that?